What's up, GERO 200?
Hey, it's week 2, assignment 5. We're talking cancer and grief, and we're in Costa Rica.
Yeah, isn't that awesome? Here, I'll show you.
So, a little bit of happy
Let's
stuff.
just show you this right here, okay? And I don't know if it's too lit up, probably is, but that's the ocean if it wasn't so bright, okay?
Okay.
But either way, it's okay. So
Alrighty.
Okay.
So I like to tag team with John on this lecture because I'm very passionate about health and public health trends, and very passionate about cancer research
Those are a
and
bunch
treatment.
of USC students back there. Okay,
That's
go
our
ahead.
class walking behind us after a full day at the beach. So anyway, so let's get started. Let's go in and look at assignment 5 and the readings. So every year, the U.S. government releases cancer data, and it's a report called the GERO report, which is the National Report on Cancer. And the 2022 report hasn't come out yet. It usually comes out in the spring-ish, but I think the pandemic has delayed things for the last few years. So we're looking at the 2021 report, and the data is always a little bit lagging behind because all this public health data has to be gathered and analyzed before it gets reported. So I think it's really important if you're a cancer patient or if you know a cancer patient to remember that we're looking backwards on this data. It doesn't necessarily reflect new treatments and up to date. You know, if you get diagnosed with cancer today and you look at survival statistics, you might be bummed out, but it's based on older treatments. And I know in my particular case with my cancer, which is leukemia, we have made really profound advances in the last 5 years, last 10 years. So things are very different for a patient who gets diagnosed today than someone who was diagnosed 10 years ago. So we're going to throw around a lot of numbers. When we talk about cancer incidence or cancer mortality, this is data that's normalized per 100,000 people in the population so that you can compare apples to apples. So the cancer incidence is the number of newly diagnosed cases. Cancer deaths is obviously the number of reported cancer deaths.
Okay. And with incidence, I always like to see the letter IN, like INC. INC means increase. So the increase that year, you'll see prevalence, and that's like if we just looked at how many people have cancer in the entire population at one moment in time. If they could have had, got their cancer could have started 10 years ago, they still have it, and that's the difference between an increase, which is incidence.
Okay. So one of the statistics that we see right away is between 2014 and 2018, cancer death rates went down for both men and women. So a lot of times when we're looking at this data, they'll drill down male, female, they'll drill down by race and ethnicity, and that gives us a lot of good public health information. We're probably seeing more advances among men than women because of decreases in smoking among men and decreases in occupational exposure, which is good news. So we've added some screenshots to the reading so that you can see these are some of the graphics that are presented by the federal government along in this GERO report. That's a link to the GERO report so you can dig down for more information. We're seeing a decline in death rates in lung cancer and melanoma, and that's because of new treatments that we have available, checkpoint inhibitors. This has been an amazing thing that we can tell your body to turn on the immune system and go and attack these lung cancer cells or these melanoma cells. So
cancer is really nefarious, and basically it's like Yoda. And so the immune system will actually destroy cancer cells. It does in you right now all the time. And but what cancer cells is they'll put like a little signal on their surface, and they say, no, I'm not cancer. You need to go away. And it's kind of Yoda-like, and so what happens is these drugs that they give come up and grab hold of that. No, I'm not cancer signal, and then the immune system comes in and goes and destroys them. So. Cool stuff.
So I'm very excited about these checkpoint inhibitors that are treating lung cancer and melanoma, and especially with non-small cell lung cancer, which is caused by cigarette smoking. Back in the day, my aunt was diagnosed with it, say 15 years ago. You got the diagnosis and you were typically dead within 2 to 3 months. And now we're seeing much longer survival times And one of the wonderful things about cancer research and the progress that we're seeing is that if you get diagnosed and you can kick the can down the road a year or two, there may be an even better treatment that comes up in the next 2 years. And these are treatments that are well tolerated. So good news, I think, for everybody. Okay, let's scroll down. The other thing that's good news for you guys, because you're young adults, is that cancer death rates are decreasing for adolescents and young adults, which we see in cancer research abbreviated as AYA, and also among children. We see good advances in cancer research for children because we have a very high clinical trial participation rate for children who get cancer. So a lot of times people say, hey, in these gerontology classes, all we ever do is give you the bad news. You're going to have a stroke, you're going to have diabetes, whatever.
We were talking to them diabetes prevention in the next lecture.
Exactly.
Blue zone, baby.
Exactly.
So, diet, exercise.
The good news about
having a good family.
That's right. The good news about cancer is there are some very easy to understand ways to prevent cancer. So don't smoke cigarettes, exercise daily, drink moderately. If you drink, 1 drink per day for women, 2 drinks for men, limit your sun exposure.
It's wine at 5, baby.
And you know what? Nobody's perfect. So if you eat healthy and exercise, then that may help counteract some of the bad effects of drinking. Your college students, we get it. But just try to manage your risk in that way. And it's risk over time. So if you've had a bad pandemic and you haven't been exercising, or you haven't been eating healthy, or you've been drinking too much, then just going forward, try to manage your risk.
And it's like Julie said, it's really the long haul. So you can see in the next lecture on diabetes how long haul, no exercise, long haul, really bad diet leading to obesity. Then you start checking the boxes of all these factors. Now putting you at really high risk for cancer. So no day, you don't have to wait. No better day than today. Just tell your parents or grandparents to start modifying their diet and exercise, and they can reduce their risk.
So I want to talk about smoking a little bit. I am a passionate lung cancer educator, I think I would say. When my aunt was diagnosed with lung cancer 15 years ago, I did not know that it was a death sentence at that time. For people who smoke, that there was such a strong causation link between smoking cigarettes and developing lung cancer. So if you look, not just lung cancer, but smoking cigarettes can lead to increased cancer rates of many other different types of cancer: kidney cancer, bladder cancer, larynx. Of course, your larynx and esophagus, you're breathing in the smoke, so it's going to affect those things. Oral cancers. My dad, lifelong smoker, overweight. He's had kidney cancer, bladder cancer, and lung cancer. So
you see this is the percent of cases that oncologists see that are linked to smoking. And so you can see here the lung, of course, with 80% of the cases were linked to smoking. We see down here, it's a smaller percentage, but nonetheless, they've done the research and they're still linked.
Absolutely. So we have another graph that just shows this incredible causative link between cigarettes and lung cancer deaths in the US. You can see that the graph is almost perfectly correlated between cigarette sales and lung cancer deaths. It's separated by about 20 years because it takes a while to develop lung cancer. And of course, back in the day...
So this is day right here, okay? Yeah. So go ahead and say back in the day, what's in the history.
When people were smoking in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, as maybe your grandparents smoked then, we didn't know. We didn't know that smoking was bad for you. The advertisements would say that smoking was healthy and that it was good for you. And so, a lot of people became addicted to cigarettes before we had any information about the health hazards.
So you can see how finally public health kicked in, 83, 86, on and on and on.
So we don't have advertisements on TV. We increase tax rates. We make it more expensive for people to buy cigarettes, so that decreases cigarette smoking.
So now we just need to do the same thing for Coca-Cola and 7-Up and all these high sugar drinks.
So people used to smoke on planes. People used to smoke in public buildings. So a lot of these changes have pretty profound public health effects. Physical activity. Really important. And even we're seeing studies that show that physical activity and diet can have a really profound effect, not just on preventing cancer, but if you are diagnosed with cancer, for example, breast cancer, and you adapt a healthy Mediterranean, mostly vegetarian diet, and you exercise regularly, you have a lower chance of having a cancer recurrence. So that's really good news. If you've already had breast cancer and you want very much to prevent it from coming back, every little lifestyle change that you make can be helpful to you. Okay, alcohol, sadly, I know in the pandemic, many of us turned to alcohol. Wine at 5, right, John? Wine at 5.
You know, 2 glasses, it's okay.
But anyway, if you drink, regularly over a decent period of time, it will be correlated to cancers like colon cancer, rectal cancer, female breast cancer. So watch your alcohol use over time, etc. So one other thing I want to say before we move on, we have pretty exciting research into cancer vaccines. The most important one that's been out on the market for a while, my son's 26, so it probably came out when he was 10 or 12, is the HPV vaccine. So what we know is that the HPV vaccine is very, very effective at preventing HPV infection, which is rampant in the population. By the time you're 40, about 50% of the population is HPV positive. So it's not like, hey, you're a bad person, you got HPV. Everybody has it. It's out there. So
you're just unlucky with your...
Yeah. Some people can fight it off and some people can't. So it's really just luck of the draw. But what we're seeing is that HPV prevents not just cervical cancer, but it prevents oral cancers, throat cancers, things like that in men. So I really encourage everyone who can, and right now the rule is if you're under 26, you can still get the HPV vaccine. It's a series, I think, of 3 shots. I really encourage everyone, whether you're male or female, to get, or non-binary, to get these vaccines that can prevent cancer.
And every time you see the text like this, it's text describing the figure below. So.
Okay, so I want to, when you look at these trends in rates of cancer, new cancer cases, and trends in cancer deaths, the red bars are the bad news. So if the bar is red, that means we had an increase. If the bar is blue, that means we had a decrease. So right now we're looking at men and women seeing increases in melanoma, increases in liver cancer. Those are related to, exposure to sun, exposure.
Tanning beds.
Yeah, tanning beds, obesity for liver cancer, alcohol consumption for liver cancer. So these are things that we can kind of control a little bit. Things that are going down, colon and rectum cancer for both men and women, lung cancer for both men and women, probably reflecting a decrease in smoking and a decrease in occupational exposure to hazardous chemicals. When we look at cancer death rates, men are seeing increases in bone cancer, oral cavity cancer. Again, this is preventable. I want men to get the HPV vaccine very much to protect you. Hepatitis C infection, things like that. So let's go up a little tiny bit. So we're seeing increases again in the red. Women are seeing increases in uterine cancer, which can be related to obesity and alcohol consumption as well, liver cancer. So these are deaths. But the good news is, if you notice, there are a lot more categories where we're seeing decreases in deaths than we're seeing increases in death.
And the black bar is basically on average. If we look at all these cancers, you can see there's an on average reduction in all forms of cancer.
So lung cancer and melanoma are the big winners. We're seeing big decreases in death rates because of the new treatments that we have available in these areas.
Awesome.
Okay. Now, the other thing that I preach about, I'm really concerned about the public health effects of the pandemic, because I know I was one of those people that I got scared. I didn't go get my mammogram. I didn't go get my checkup. After I was vaccinated, I spent the day on the phone making appointments. Okay, let's go get my teeth cleaned. Let's go get my mammogram. Let's go do this. Let's go do that. And so I made the rounds of all the doctors to get caught up. Now, here's the bad news. Not everyone has gotten back into the routine. When you have a yearly visit and they call you or send you a postcard, or maybe you've already made your appointment for the next year, you stay in that routine of getting this preventive care. What we're seeing right now is we're seeing a racial disparity. White women have started going back and getting their mammograms Black women have not. So if you
So what's your
know
prediction on the Sears report then?
what my prediction
deaths?
is that we're going to see some bad impact in terms of breast cancer, in terms of colon cancer. People weren't getting colonoscopies, so we're expecting to see increases in cancer deaths because people will be diagnosed later when it's harder to treat. So if you care about anyone over 40, tell your parents, tell your grandparents, tell your aunts and uncles, go get their colonoscopies, go get their mammograms. Make sure they get back in the swing of things of getting that annual for mammograms every 3 to 5 years, depending on your situation for colonoscopies. So here's data from a 2020 article that says we're going to see what they call excess deaths, more deaths than we would have expected to see absent the circumstances of the pandemic. And you can see that from 2020 to 2030, the next 10 years, these colorectal and breast cancer deaths are going to increase by quite a bit.
And again, it's because of early diagnosis and early aggressive treatment that was lost. And cancers get in there and they take off, and you can't mess around.
Yep. So get out there and get your preventive screening. Now, the other thing that I get pretty fired up about are when we look at incidence rate and then we look at death rate, we see some data that can be very troubling. The data has been trending in a better, happier direction. But when we look at the incidence rate, we see that white men have the highest, white people in general have the highest incident rate, probably because of more frequent diagnosis, better access to health care. Some occupational exposure might account for that. But when we look at the death rate, we see that non-Hispanic Black people have the highest death rate. So that's a disconnect. So what we need to work on is education. We need to work on access to health care.
And trust.
We need to work on, absolutely, we need to work on trust, and we need to make sure that we are not letting people die because of the color of their skin. So we've got to do better as a society in the U.S. So it's very interesting. We see Black men have the highest death rate among males. Black females have the highest death rate among females. Black men are suffering from prostate cancer, lung, and colorectal cancer. Those are all kind of embarrassing cancers. Think about it. I don't want to go to the doctor and have my prostate manipulated. I don't want to have a colonoscopy, and we're embarrassed sometimes to get lung cancer because quite often people blame the victim. They say, oh, did you smoke? Were you a bad person? Did you bring this on yourself? Look, cancer's rolling the dice. A lot of us are going to get it during our lifetimes.
It's getting so hot and humid all of a sudden, man.
It's okay. It's gorgeous here. Okay. So anyway, we've got to work on prevention. We've got to work on education. We've got to work on early detection and early treatment for people, regardless of whether you're male, female, white, Black, Hispanic. Our Asian Pacific Islander people in the U.S. tend to have the lowest incidence rates of cancer and the lowest death rates. So they are doing something magical. It could be diet, it could be family support, it could be access to healthcare. I don't think we really know the answer. We've got some information from the National Cancer Institute about, this is more of the biological information about cancer. You can have a tumor, it can be malignant, which means it's going to grow quickly and be aggressive and take over and potentially be fatal. You can have a tumor that's benign. So it can be like my son had a benign tumor in his ear. He had to have surgery and had to have it removed because if it had continued to grow, it would have been a problem for him.
The benign tumors tend to be slower growers, and they don't metastasize. They don't move to other parts of the bodies and things like that.
Absolutely. So we have this quick video that you can watch that kind of explains cancer biology.
Absolutely. It's worth it. It's worthy of the 10-minute video.
10 minutes.
And then here's a key concept. Right?
We added this graph to the reading a few years ago because a lot of students have trouble understanding oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes. So when they're normal, so you're healthy, you're normal, you're young, you have these proto-oncogenes and you have these tumor suppressor genes. So a tumor suppressor gene suppresses tumors. It keeps tumors from surviving.
Right, and it's what I talked about in terms of the biology of aging. Like I said, these tumor suppressor genes are involved in DNA repair. And so they're doing this job all the time, repairing the DNA so you don't have mutations. And then if you have too many mutations, then they are the kind of the supervisor that says, you know what, we need to kill the cell off. So P53 is the big one where it's monitoring how many problems you have in your genetics. And if they get too massive, then it goes to another part of the cell that says, you know what, time to kill this cell, time for suicide. But if it's mutated, the most common cancer mutation, all the cancers, is the P53, where it's gone, nobody's supervising this, and the cells go out of control. And that's called the tumor suppressor gene.
Now, fun fact, elephants have multiple copies of P53, which is the most well-known tumor suppressor gene, and people only have 2 copies. So if you have a deletion or a mutation in your P53 gene, it may affect 1, it may affect 2. It's usually bad news.
Yeah, and the proto-oncogenes, again, these are normal guys that every time you need a new skin cell, just a little gas pedal and goes, okay, new skin cell from your stem cells. Every time you need a new red blood cell, there's a little gas pedal, okay. And what happens is these growth genes go, okay, we're going to multiply and boom, boom, boom in these cells, and they do it at just the right time, very regulated, everything is good, and you're a normal person. Then the proto-oncogene, which is the same gene that now has a mutation, instead of driving cell division once every 2 seconds, drives 5 million cells to divide every 2 seconds, and or the individual cells are doing it at absolutely warp speed. Now it's an oncogene.
So you might have just a single point mutation of a single DNA base pair that causes this cell to go from normal growth to crazy out of control gasoline. Okay, so let's talk about grief. What? Am I having hair issues?
It's hotter.
I'm not that hot, I swear.
It's hot.
But anyway, I have weird hair.
No. I can't even tell you how hot and humid it is down here right now. Go ahead.
No, it's lovely. So anyway, I want to talk about grief. And
this is your discussion now, guys.
Yes, so this is your discussion. And some of you, unfortunately, because of the pandemic or just because of family circumstances, you may have experienced the loss of a loved one. You may not have, because a lot of you are pretty young and you've been able to, have young parents, young grandparents, and things are going pretty well. You might have experienced grief over doing badly on a test, not getting the internship you wanted.
Having a shitty boyfriend or girlfriend.
Relationship problems can create a very deep sense of grief and loss.
Loss of a dog. But we are tying this to cancer because you do go through these stages of grief when you get this diagnosis of cancer because it's so scary. It's so scary.
There's a lot of fear and anxiety surrounding a diagnosis of cancer, whether you're the patient or whether you're a caregiver. You worry for the person. But anyway, I want to just talk a little bit about processing grief, processing loss. You might have someone who's still alive, but they're unavailable to you because you are estranged, or maybe they have a drug or alcohol addiction and they've disappeared or dropped out of sight, or they're just not available to you anymore. So there's a lot of different ways that this can impact you. The number one thing I can say from my own experience with grief, my mom died suddenly a few years ago, and we were very close. So it was a very, very hard time for me. Give yourself time, be patient with yourself. If you love someone or something and you lose it, you're going to feel sad. Those emotions are real, they're important. It's a tribute to the person that you've lost that you feel this. And also be patient with the people around you because we all grieve differently. When my mom died, I probably cried. I'm not a crier, right, John? I literally cried every day for like 6 months.
I cried during American Idol.
Oh my God, yeah, he's a weeper. But I cried in the shower. I cried in the car, and not like sobbing, but just like little sad tears. So that's okay. It's okay to be sad. And now I'm at the point, she passed away 3 years ago, that Christmas wasn't as hard. I just felt happiness of thinking of the memories I had of her. But then her birthday came around and I felt sad again. So you're going to have these little ups and downs where you accept and then you kind of retreat and you're not accepting, you miss the person. One really profound thing that I read recently is that when someone dies, the relationship doesn't end. The relationship is still there. You still love them. You still remember them. You still think about them. It's just that they're not physically present anymore.
And we heard something today from one of our students who's down here in Costa Rica with her, and she's Vietnamese ancestry. And so the folklore is when you see the white butterflies, and there are butterflies everywhere here. We saw some white butterflies. That is that person that you lost is coming back to visit you.
Yeah, so there were 2 white butterflies outside our
Really
room,
cool.
And I immediately said, "Oh my gosh, it's my mom! How awesome is that?"
So here's some quick videos that that you can look at that talk about grief, and you do go through it. You kind of wrangle with it.
Yeah, the classic treatise on grief was Kubler-Ross, and she talks about denial, anger, bargaining, despair, and acceptance. Now, this is not linear. You don't go through it once and never go through it again. You might hop over a step. You might go from denial to despair and then back to anger. And so you may go through this multiple times, and it's not 100% this is how it is for everyone. So that's just one way of describing the grieving process that I think is helpful.
Yeah. So, and if you guys have issues with this, email Julie.
You can do an alternative assignment. I understand sometimes these things are too fresh and too close and too personal. And so I appreciate that. And I don't want you to feel like you're on the spot and like you have to talk about your personal losses in front of everyone. But if you are comfortable and you can share your experience or share what you've been through.
Is it called I have problems with malapropism, but it's catharsis.
There is something cathartic about it, and just sharing the human experience and
it's healing unto itself.
And understanding, sadly, a lot of us have experienced some profound losses in the last few years, and both of my sons have lost their best friends.
Best friends to suicide.
To suicide,
year. So, and that's a whole different class. I teach about it in GERO 315. A lot of you guys are graduating, but it's a great GE class where we talk about mental health in that class.
And so if you are in a situation like that where you've been impacted by someone that you're close to, just know that we understand, we get it. It's hard. It's very hard, but you will get through it.
Well, all right, I'm gonna thank you, Julia. She's the best. All right.
Right on, dude.
Right on. So I'm gonna just kind of lift up here and hopefully not trip and fall. I'm gonna show you a little bit of the hotel that's not looking at the sun. All right, so we're gonna keep going over here, guys. So it's a really trippy place. Okay, so hopefully you can kind of see. This is the pool area right here, and it's actually shaped like a heart. All right, so there it is right there. How cool is that, man? So it's beautiful, Pura Vida, and then it's kind of bright over here, but this is the general restaurant area of the hotel. It's an amazing hotel, guys. So yeah, this is our May master class, and maybe one of you guys can join us next year. It's super fun, and we'll see you guys next time. And cool. Peace.